Alright, there that goes.
Yay! We are recording! We did it. Okay. Are you ready? I'm ready.
Let's do this.
First, let me introduce the podcast. Welcome, everybody. This is Bliss Fully Aware, the show in which opinionated people get together and explain to you what's going on in the nerd and fandom world. I am Bliss, and I am joined today by my good friend, Avery. Avery, say hi to the people.
Hi, people.
Avery.
What to do?
You and I have known each other for a very long time. We have a lot of things in common.
Yeah.
We're both writers. We're both giant nerds. God, what else do we have in common?
Let's see. We're both weebs. We both have a higher chance of getting killed by the police for just looking different.
Yay! Institutionalized racism.
We're both into women.
Yeah! That's the best thing we have in common. I wish today's episode was more about that. Unfortunately, we're going to backtrack a little bit to the fact that we're both weebs.
This is very true.
Okay, so today, Avery, I gotta ask you a serious question right at the get-go.
Alright, what's that?
Have you ever heard about a show called Hetalia?
I have heard the name Hetalia. I think it's an anime about anthropomorphized countries?
Yeah, pretty much. So, it is an anime. It was first a webcomic, then it was a manga, now it's an anime, and it has a film and a video game. And it centers around these personifications of countries and how they have interacted over time. It is set in World War II, and the main protagonists are the Axis powers.
Oh, well, this can only end well.
Now, that isn't the only thing the show covers, but the fact is it starts with the Axis powers versus the Allied powers, and it is actively set as a story of the blunders on both sides during World War II. And there are some depictions of political leaders like Hitler, which is great.
Oh yeah, you always want to see Hitler. More Hitler, but just always.
As a Jew, I almost want to disagree.
As a black man, no, I don't want to see Hitler. he hates me just as much as he hates you.
He does. And I guess the main basis of what I want to talk about today is going to end up being about the difference between parody and praise. Parody and praise. That's what I'm trying to say, if I can get my damn words together.
Sometimes those words are tricky. You have to wrangle them. You have to show them who's boss. In the words of Donald Trump, you have to grab him by the... Sorry, I'm just not going to say that word.
Speaking of Hitler. So, the reason I'm bringing up Hetalia, as this is a fandom news podcast, it was quote-unquote leaked that they will be getting a new season in 2021.
How many seasons do they have?
Well, so far they've had 6 seasons.
Wait a minute. This shit lasted 6 seasons?
Yes.
How?
Yes,
World War II didn't even last that damn long.
Well, so technically, the show's era in World War II only lasts through seasons 1 and 2. And then you've got... So the first 2 seasons were called Axis Powers. Hetalia, Axis Powers. Then you go on to World Series, Beautiful World, World Twinkle, and then the movie is Paint It White.
Did it somehow become a shoujo manga in the middle of this shit?
Let me preface, the episodes are only 5 minutes long, because they're based off very small parody comics that got stretched into semi-stories in the manga, and then sort of something more cohesive storyline-wise for the anime and film.
Okay.
It doesn't follow a static timeline. It does a lot of jumping around, which is fine. Sorry, every time I think about this stupid show, I just think about how, of all the places in history to start, you decided to start in World War II with Germany being the protagonist. And
oh, that is just poor taste.
And the show Hetalia, it means stupid Italy, give or take how you're translating it. And it is supposed to be a parody about everybody's blunders, and Italy, northern Italy. Italy is broken up into two different countries. The choices of how many countries there are and which ones get to be people is kind of murky. But so northern Italy becomes friends with Germany right at the beginning, around World War I. It jumps immediately into World War II with the first episode. And it's uncomfortable because while they don't explicitly say that they're Nazis, Germany is depicted in an SS uniform. They are running around having fights with the Allies. And it's very obvious that it's set in World War II. They don't mince words about it. It's just the things that they choose not to say is interesting, considering that they're calling it a parody, but then they tiptoe around the topics.
It's actually kind of interesting. I've noticed it happens a lot in anime or manga that has some bits of nationalism in it. Anime and manga, or I wouldn't just say anime and manga, but Japanese media in general seems to really have a thing about Nazis. And a lot of times if you see someone represented from Germany, they quite literally usually are a Nazi. So if we look towards, for instance, Helsing, the entire Millennium Organization are Nazis. If you watch Tanya the Evil, they are literally Nazis. Strike Witches, Nazis. Japan loves them some Nazis. Or is it supposed to be ironic because they learned from their past? I really don't know what Japan's doing there.
I have tried, and I know that it's this much deeper cultural dive than I have actually done, but there's no concise reason for why. It's just a celebration, I guess, of the part of their history. Don't quote me on that. I'm not some cultural guru on why Japan likes their Nazis.
It's weird though, because in Germany, there's a YouTube channel, and I'm probably about to butcher the name, but I think it's called What I Learned Today, and essentially they talked at one point about how Germany handled their history lessons and how they handle history classes as opposed to the United States. So, for instance, in the United States, there are certain states like Texas that want to completely get rid of talks about slavery because it makes the state look bad. Germany, however, is going to smack you in the ever-loving face with Nazi imagery because they want you to know it's bad. They want you to know Nazism is bad. They want you to know nationalism is bad. And they continuously beat you over the head with it because they don't ever want it to happen again, because allowing Hitler to do what he did made their entire country look bad. And on some levels, Japan sort of does the same. Japan, it's weird. Germany in their history books are essentially like, this is what happened, this was bad, we don't ever want it to happen again. Japan in their history books is like, World War II happened, next page. It happened. And it's kind of weird because a lot of times you will see them glamorize and or make heroes of kamikaze pilots.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of interesting that one country took the prospect of, okay, we had a hand in a horrible issue of history, and we don't ever want it to happen again. And at the same time, Japan never wants that to happen again, which is why they also don't have a standing military force. They just have the Japanese Self-Defense Force. But at the same time, they're not actively saying, yo, this was horrible. They just seem to glamorize that portion. Now, I guess we also have to look at it in terms of America, because we haven't seemed to learn our lesson yet, because we continue to put out imagery that kind of reinvokes these instances of hatred, of separation, and a lot of it is to show that, this was bad. One of the best examples that I've seen as of late has been Lovecraft Country. And Lovecraft Country, if you are African American and you watch that first episode, hell, you watch the entire season that's been out, it is rough. It hurts to watch. But it's showing you, this was horrible. This was bad. They basically are punching you over the head with it, like, don't ever let this happen again. And like I said, that's the same lesson that Germany does. However, that's only certain parts of American media, because American media since then has a tendency to, always glamorize us as the heroes and we're the good guys. And no, we've done some horrible things. We've been in a lot of wars we shouldn't have been in, and we kind of took over people's countries. And we won't talk about all the horrible misgivings that America has been through because that'd be a podcast all in itself. But it's just interesting how the countries take a different approach towards their history, and I guess why Nazis are a thing in Japan. Kind of strange.
Yeah, I don't know. I know that when my mom came to the U.S. from Mexico, she was 10. And she had to learn about the Alamo in class after having already learned about the Alamo in school in Mexico. And got into a big old argument with the teacher because the way we teach it in Texas is not the way it's taught in Mexico.
Oh yeah, of course not.
A lot of people don't even realize that we lost the battle at the Alamo.
Yeah.
And then when you point it out to them, they're like, well, let me backtrack. It's about honoring the men who died there. And I'm like, oh, the racist drunk men who died there. We're going to honor them.
Well, I mean, it goes into the same thing. You think about, other American wars. People want to talk about, well, remember what happened in Korea? We lost. Like, remember Vietnam? We lost. Like, we've lost a lot of the big initiatives we went into, but we want to, constantly talk about it. And yes, we should always honor these veterans, but don't give reverence to things we shouldn't have been in to fucking begin with. Mm-hmm. It's so strange, and especially the way our history books are written. They say history is written by the victor. And in this case, we can't even say history is written by the victors because it's just written by, they're never going to see this book, so let's write it the way we want it to sound. And it's really kind of strange that, most people don't realize, America lost. Like, we lost the Battle of the Alamo. But then again, I have a friend who honestly didn't, and this is, it's somewhat similar. She didn't so for anybody who's listening, I'm black, but I'm Brazilian. I told a friend of mine when I first met her that I was Brazilian, and she looked at me, she's like, no, you're not. And I was like, yeah, I am. And she was just like, but you're black. I was like, sweetheart, you do realize Brazil has almost as many black people as Africa, right? It's like, and you do realize that Brazil had the world's largest slave trade, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting you say that because a lot of the characters in Hetalia, one of the complaints is that most of them are white or whitewashed.
Oh, yeah.
There aren't a ton of African nations represented. Egypt is a player, but Egypt is whitewashed as hell. The Seychelles Islands is a player. They're whitewashed as hell.
I know, because of course, African nations are, white people are only a racial minority there. It's all right. No.
And when asked, the series creator, Kimaruya, I hope I'm saying that right, I'm sorry if I'm not, he has said that he did not want to get into touchy subjects.
But you talked about World War II!
World War II!
That doesn't make sense!
Well, and it's interesting because there is no Ireland, or at least not that I know of, because he can't decide what Ireland's supposed to look like, and there's the whole fact that Ireland is technically two different Irelands. And
yeah.
I trip up over this series a lot. I did watch it for a while, and I did participate in the fandom, until the death threats started rolling in. Let me tell you a story, Avery.
Oh, I'm feeling this is not going to go. Oh.
My problem with Hetalia isn't actually the series.
Okay.
I think that, and we can get into it later, I think it does make a genuine attempt to be parody. Whether or not it succeeds at that is a horse of a different color, but the problem I have with Hetalia is the fans. The fandom, because Germany is the main protagonist, latched on to Germany, and there's a lot of queer baiting in the show. So the fact that Germany and Northern Italy have this sort of love, almost interest style thing going on, the will they, won't they.
Well, is that supposed to be like an allusion to Hitler and Mussolini, or?
That would be my guess, but I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. The thing is, the countries aren't the dictators or leaders. The countries are at the beck and call of what the leaders and the people want.
Okay.
But so a lot of fangirls coalesced around Germany. And...
Hold on, before you continue. Let me just go ahead and take a guess. This show has a large female contingent?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I can sort of see where this is going. Okay.
Hetalia, the anime, came up right as the rise of openly queer-baiting animes really started to surface. Okay. And I'm talking this is queer-baiting under the guise of being an anime about a sport kind of series. Like Free!
I really dig Free.
It was great, but you gotta admit, so much queer baiting.
You know what? As a straight man, it did not hit me for a long time. After a while, I'm like, these dudes are real pretty. And I'm just sitting there thinking, I'm like, they real friendly with each other. Huh. You know what though? This makes me want to go do free swimming. Let me go ahead and do that shit. So, it didn't hit me until like, oh, this is Yuri on Ice. But they just didn't go all the way. Okay.
Yeah.
Which also I love Yuri on Ice.
I love Yuri on Ice too in a separate way. It has a lot of issues, but I kind of like complicated media.
I know nothing about the complications of Yuri on Ice. I just think it's a cute story.
Avery, we're gonna have some conversations, you and I.
Oh, joy.
Maybe when they, leak that Yuri on Ice is gonna finally come back. The rumor that Hetalia is coming back in 2021 seems semi-legit. We'll see. But getting back to it, it was the fan base. Everybody really liked Germany. And, of course, there were other people who really liked, America, England, France. They all had very likable personalities and very shippable. The whole series is just very, very shippable. The problem is when fans start cosplaying as Germany or just as Nazis, and then going to conventions and sig heiling and taking pictures doing that, or going to Holocaust memorials cosplaying Germany, or making offensive Jewish art as a joke, quote unquote.
Oh, okay, yeah, no, that's...
And then in the way almost every fandom does, the snake starts eating its own tail. The Germany stans, started openly lashing out at fans of the series who would admit that they were Jewish. Like me, I'm never ashamed to admit that I'm Jewish. And I started receiving a lot of death threats. I have never received as many death threats from a fandom than I have from the Hetalia fandom.
I'm kind of confused though. Like, what is there to lash out at you about being Jewish? That honestly seems to make no sense. Like, what is there to lash out about?
Well, it breaks down to these people wanting to emulate what they consider the joke aspect of Germany being involved in World War II with the concentration camps and the extermination of people of color, the mentally handicapped, the Jewish, the Romani, the gays. Which, why didn't you lash out at the gays then? No, we're just gonna go for the obvious. Well, okay, and so that's the other thing.
Well, I was like, are we gonna talk about the rumor that Ava Braun was actually... Okay.
That's a separate issue. No, the other thing is a lot of the fan base was younger.
Okay.
And as you said, America doesn't teach its history very well. And a lot of other countries teach World War II history kind of selectively. So a lot of these young people were coming into the series not knowing much and taking what was said in the series as rote, which is a problem. Because World War II was not cute. The Axis powers were not cute. There were a lot of atrocities committed, obviously. If you weren't aware of that, listeners, Germany and the Axis powers did some fucked up shit.
Yeah, it's... all jokes aside, I feel like, we've been just joking and laughing at this point about everything. But that becomes the most dangerous part about incorrectly teaching history. And that people don't know the real atrocities that occurred. I could speak till I'm blue in the face about, the things that America has done wrong, or things any other country has done wrong. And you should be taught about those things, because by being taught those things, you set up a path to not redo them. Now, do you listen to them? 2020 will show you something completely different. But, for the most part, you learn from your mistakes. And when shows such as Hetalia, in some form or fashion, begin to glamorize a particular nasty part of a country's history, it pushes a false narrative. And then that false narrative is continued to be passed down as people think, oh, well, that's true. Like you said, they believed that it, believed its road and, kept it moving. And that's where you end up with people having and I would say mostly honest misconception of things. And, like you said, the Axis powers, they did horrible, horrible things. And some horrible shit happened in World War II. We want to talk about the number of lives that were lost.
You get this in a lot of anime-centered fandoms. As you said, Nazis are a common feature in anime. So you get a lot of cosplayers who cosplay Nazis and Nazi imagery used in the cosplay community, and that's its own complicated rabbit hole, because a lot of Nazi imagery bleeds into a lot of aspects of everyday life that still persist that people don't realize or think about. And it is what it is at this point. I'm not gonna nitpick every little detail. I am gonna nitpick people dressing up, though, as Nazi Germany and going to a Holocaust memorial or a Holocaust survivor gravesite and sig heiling. That bothers me.
No, I mean it should. It's horrible. The people that thought it was funny to do that, I don't care. They was like, well, it's a joke. No, that's not a joke. Those are people's family members that you're disrespecting.
Well, and as a Jewish person, I've experienced that many, many times. And Hetalia was not the first fandom that I got death threats from. There was a moment back in my early days of fandom where I stuck a toe into the South Park fandom, and that was the first fandom I got death threats as a Jew.
Girl, what are you doing? Like,
I am existing!
Are you a magnet for this shit? I don't understand.
I will openly talk about my heritage, my culture, my traumas. I like to be very open about it, because if I can even educate or help one person, then it's worth the death threats I receive. So I do tend to wave those flags pretty openly online. And maybe that makes me an easy target, and that's fine. If I get the death threat and some poor teenage girl doesn't, then I can rest my head at night soundly. But it is sad. It is sad that fans will take it to that extreme. That is what frustrates me about the idea of Hetalia coming back, is I fear the resurgence of that fandom, especially in the political climate we live in. I think the problem, though, comes from the fact that we're not taught a lot of... I mean, we can't even be taught the correct history. That is a defense in the fandom for why most characters are whitewashed, is because apparently that is how Japan apparently, huge air quotes, views a lot of other nations as just being white, blonde-haired, and blue-eyed.
I mean, I can see that.
Yeah, I do too. I'm not apologizing for Hetalia or defending it on that aspect, but that is the defense, and I can track the line of logic in that defense. It is what it is. There's a lot of whitewashing in anime, and it's certainly not going to stop cold turkey.
Oh, of course. Well, you mentioned that, obviously there are not many African nations there, but you did mention Egypt and the Seychelles Islands, and, it kind of makes me just, a lot of mangaka or, anime creators don't necessarily... If black characters are ever introduced, they're usually gonks. If you don't know what a gonk is, people, it's a trope, but it usually means an ugly bastard. Usually looks very ape-like, monkey-like. Usually it looks like a very, very, very bad racial stereotype. Usually huge, big, colored lips, big, white smiles. You get where I'm going. It's like an old minstrel character. Black women in anime and manga tend to be almost the equivalent of mammies. And, very, very few manga, include black characters. And it's for good reason. I've listened to a couple of interviews, and a lot of them say because, well, there's not black people in Japan. And that's where their stories are centered. But the ones that do include them often are these weird caricatures. I would say the one person I've seen that doesn't tend to whitewash their characters and actively wants to include characters of color. He openly stated, and this is Atsushi Okubo. He is the creator of Soul Eater, creator of Fire Force. If you like shonen manga, he's your man. He actively wanted to put black people in his manga. Because he straight up said, I want black characters, because he wanted to include them, because he felt that black characters weren't ever included. All of these manga and anime and whatnot want to include characters from all over the world, but you can't seem to put in black people? And he thought something was wrong with that. And so, he actively has, put in, black characters in both of his stories, and they're main characters, and they're badasses at that. And I think it's really interesting that, because I believe you said that Hetalia went for the whitewashing route of Egypt and the Seychelles Islands, which, I mean, America has its own issues with whitewashing Egyptians. Mm-hmm. We want to talk about gods of Egypt. And it even goes back down to our understanding of history. Everyone seems to think, oh, well, Cleopatra, white woman. No, Cleopatra wasn't white. It's like, I hate to tell you, she wasn't. Cleopatra was very much so a brown woman.
Well, I think a lot of that also stems from how they're just represented in media. In America, a lot of early Egyptian depiction in film was,
white people.
White people.
I mean, and I feel bad just saying white people, because, white people is very different. You can be Anglo-Saxon, Caucasus, Caucasus Mountains, blah, 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 blah. Whether it break down into nationality, ethnic groups, whatever. The main representation and, the idea that, at least in the early parts of Hollywood, that's all that was there. There were nothing but white actors. Anybody of color was always a background character. And, and unfortunately, we even look to, religion. Our understanding of the Christian Jesus is what we see. The white man with the long brown hair. Usually has blue eyes, I believe. I don't remember. It's been a while since I've seen a portrait of Christ at a church. Usually the churches I go to try not to put that imagery up. It's scary for a lot of people, because a lot of times it's the image of Christ on the cross and nailings and all that type of stuff. So it's kind of jarring for a lot of younger people, and they try not to put that up. But in the Bible, though, the Bible says that Christ had skin of olive and hair is like sheep's wool. That don't sound like that photo.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. It's just it goes down to the creator's mindset. Mm-hmm. Obviously, here the creator, I think you said, didn't want to get into touchy issues. I don't know what touchy issue there would have been by making Egypt or the Seychelles Islands, black, brown, or just any somewhat form of colored. But
Well, and to be fair, as the years have passed, up until I think the video game, Seychelles has gotten a little bit darker in each season. She is not what I would consider black appearing. She is a tan looking girl. White girl.
Well, I mean, honestly, black folks, we come in all colors. Mm-hmm. So, my sister is very, very pale. My sister's almost white passing. My mom is white passing, or so my wife is Puerto Rican, which for most people who don't know is Latin, but they're considered Afro-Latin, and my wife is incredibly white passing. You would not know if I didn't tell you. So,
and to be fair, I'm incredibly white passing. You couldn't tell seeing me on the street that I'm Jewish or Hispanic. So it has nothing to do with the bright pink hair.
Yeah. I would never guess with the bright pink hair. I would just ask you, is Rainbow Bright missing you?
You wouldn't ask if I'm an anime pro tag?
No. I would ask you, did you just get back from Equestria? And what is your actual pony name?
Blow.
Hey, nothing but love for the My Little Pony community.
Yeah.
I've never watched it. I know very little about it, but my goddaughter loves it.
That's another fandom that I was in for half a second, and it got ugly real fast, and I said, you know what? Nah.
That My Little Pony fandom is deep. And here's the thing, and I'm going to sound very stupid, so I apologize. I don't really understand what fandom is. So the fact that I'm on a podcast about fandom talking to you is kind of ironic. I understand being a fan of things and being part of a community of things, but I don't understand what fandom, quote unquote, is.
Well, so to break it down into the most simple explanation, fandom is a community for people who are a fan of things, who want to be very obsessive about it, who want to cosplay and draw art and write fanfic and talk about it all day, every day. It isn't just nerd stuff, though. And I think that is a big misconception when people talk about fandom as it becomes more mainstream. It isn't just the Star Wars fandom or the Hetalia fandom. Sports have fandoms. There's a guy who lives down the street from me. I'm not even kidding. He has 50 burnt orange flamencos and an actual, honest to God, cement, handcrafted, he had this made, cement longhorn in his front yard because he loves UT that much. He flies more than one flag. His car is burnt orange. And this man is actually genuinely the nicest man I've met in my neighborhood. He has a big old vote blue no matter who sign out there. It's the only speck of not burnt orange in his whole damn yard. But I would say he participates in a fandom.
Okay. So it's more like, and Blizzard fans, please don't hate me, it's like going above and beyond, almost into obsession territory.
A little bit. You can be as deep into it or as far away from fandom as you want. Not everybody has to have the same level of obsession, but if you've listened to Kendra talk about Game of Thrones, Kendra loves Game of Thrones. Season 8 excluded. I love Has Been Hotel. I've brought it up many times. We joke that we have to go into our own separate corners when we talk about these things because it feels like that sometimes. It feels like fandom is a separate corner of my life that I sit in for big chunks of my day, and then sometimes I go to the kitchen.
It's okay. I now that you sort of explained it a little bit, I get it. I had funny enough, when I used to work at the school I went to, a girl tried to come up and sit with me at lunch because she wanted to flirt with me. And I didn't realize this. And at the time, I was listening to a Power Rangers podcast. I am a huge Power Rangers fan.
See?
And so she came and sat down with me and started talking. And she was like, "Oh, what are you talking? What are you listening to?" And I went off on like a 20-minute rant about Bruce Kalish and Kalish explosions and why the Power Rangers production had to move to New Zealand. It is a whole thing. We somehow still ended up dating. I don't know how she didn't run for the hills, but it's like, so I get it now. I get it now.
There are probably a lot of people out there who participate in fandom without realizing it. You don't have to be the all-out Marvel fandom nerd, which I would say Marvel is another one that you probably tiptoe around the fandom, Avery.
Marvel, meh. Honestly, like, I used to be really bad with comic books, like, super bad. But I never really got involved. I've never been one of those people that just wants to, like, sit down and talk about it. I like reading the stories.
Bullshit! You gave me an hour-long lecture about the first Captain America when we first met!
Okay. that occurred because my friend was so fucking into Captain America. He gave me that hour-long speech. Like, he is obsessive about Captain America. Like, obsessive.
Well, you can thank him for our friendship, because sitting there in that lecture, I was just like, you know what? I like this guy.
It's funny though, because you do mention, I gave my friends an hour-long speech about the X-Men. Like, I am probably, if I have to say I'm obsessed with anything, it's probably the X-Men. That time I got reincarnated as a slime in Borderlands. Like, catch a ride. And I remember talking to my wife, and we were walking out of a restaurant one night, and she goes, and it just popped into my head. I was like, you know what? I was like, when I die, I was like, I don't want that, loving husband, blah, blah, blah stuff. I was like, nope. I want Catch a Ride, Vault Hunter, written on my tombstone. she looks me dead in the face and goes, no. I don't even get my final wish in death.
I constantly joke with Kelty. I'll come up with really good quotes from movies or books or whatever we're watching together. I'll be like, you know what? As I lay dying, holding your hand, these are going to be my last words. And she gets so mad every time. But I want my death to be memorable. Damn it.
Bliss, it's not a season finale. It's the end of your life.
I would say that's a wrap-up.
That's the ultimate wrap-up, fam.
You can put that on my tombstone. How many seasons did I get? 6 seasons in a movie, bitch.
Poor Hetalia. Like, it's kind of crazy because you're mentioning, like, I know we just went the hell off topic, but, like, it kind of goes back into that. I guess, the fandom of Hetalia got so large that it was able to last for 6 seasons. I have no idea how, based on the premise you told me, but I don't know anything about it. So.
Well, I definitely dipped out after season 4. And yeah, there's a lot to cover in world history. They do touch their toe into colonialism. That's a big old theme. To the point where in the video game, there is a moment where England puts a collar on Seychelles and tells her that she belongs to him now. Then she turns around and beats him up.
Okay. Woo! Okay, I was like, that's, that's,
Well, and the relationship that America and England, I will say this, my favorite arc in the whole series is the American Revolution. They cock tease you with that for a long ass time. Payout is not as great as I would have liked, but it was a very interesting concept. And it was, I know people ship them, but it was pitched, at least, with them having a sibling-like relationship, with England being America's big brother-esque character, whereas Canada was the little brother to France.
Mm-hmm.
Spain took in, or southern Italy, so, the dynamics of the whole universe, England, France, oh god, who else am I thinking of? Well, it doesn't matter. A lot of, the main colonizing countries were siblings. It's interesting. There are moments in the show where I'm like, hey, look at you. That's a clever way to think about that. And then there's just the rest of it. Speaking of the rest of it, though, I want to pivot real quick to an ad break.
Okay.
And then we'll be back to get into the part of this show where I'm going to get kind of angry.
Run now!
And we're back.
Are Are you still here? You still here? Yup. That's your fault.
Avery, I want to talk to you about the main defense people make when they talk about Hetalia.
Okay.
Their defense is, well, the show is meant to be a parody.
Okay.
After all, the show is literally named Stupid Italy, or Useless Italy. I've seen different translations. And I do think that it has moments where it hits the nail on the head and actually is a parody. Mm-hmm. I think there are some actually very good moments where it does that. The rest of the show, though, I feel, really struggles with finding that balance. Because I think in being a parody, you have to walk a very fine line of truth and fiction for the sake of humor. Think Hogan's Heroes. Okay. POW camps weren't like that.
Yeah.
I feel like that's an almost perfect example of a show that was set in World War II that probably did not need to exist, that was meant to be a parody. And I think it had a lot of really good moments. I think that show definitely had a higher rate of moments than Hetalia does, and Hogan's Heroes didn't last nearly as long. And then there's things like MASH, where they have satirical moments, but it was, billed as a comedy, but I wouldn't, personally, I would not say MASH was a comedy. The whole series ends with the Korean War ending, and spoilers, everybody, Hawkeye having to go to a mental hospital for a minute because of PTSD and suicidal ideation and all that good stuff. And these are just talking about things that are shows that existed that surrounded war. I think there are real ways to satirize war.
Yeah.
I don't think Hetalia hit that mark 90% of the time.
And why would you say you believe it didn't hit that mark?
I think personally, I feel like it didn't hit that mark because of the balance of fact to fiction.
Okay.
And when I say fiction, I mean fictionalizing things for the sake of humor. Well, it was like you pointed out earlier. Why did Germany and Italy have this pseudo-teasing relationships? Was it because of the relationship Hitler and Mussolini had? Was it because of the relationship Germany had with Franz Ferdinand? Was it any number of actual things? But it never coalesced into a legitimate explanation. It was just this, here it is. And that's fine. That's fine. But then I don't feel like you get to say that it's a parody because you're not making a social commentary on anything. You're just making a dumb joke for the sake of making a joke.
Yeah.
And you've set your show in a controversial point in history and you're making jokes, but if you're not making a statement or making a commentary, then you're just making jokes, and the jokes feel hollow to me or inappropriate because of the weight of what you're joking about. I think humor makes things less legitimate to some people.
Yeah, I get that. To play devil's advocate, I think sometimes adding humor to a painful situation makes things easier to digest. Mm-hmm. Just depending on the subject matter. Like, something such as, like, the Holocaust is a really tough subject. And almost every mainstream television show that has lasted for X number of years has made fun of the Holocaust at some point. But at the same time, they have also brought awareness to things like the Holocaust. They brought awareness to ethnic cleansings in Africa, or the entire, situation, Berlin Wall, things like that. All of those situations have been, things have been made fun of to such a degree. But it's also the reason why those things exist in the cultural zeitgeist now. And people know them just off the top of their heads. They may not know from where. And especially a lot of, children being born nowadays have no idea what the hell the Holocaust is. They'll learn.
Will they? Will they?
It depends on if your legislators want to get rid of things in the history books, like turning slaves into indentured servants.
Thanks, Jim Crow.
But it is what it is. But, for the most part, they will learn. They'll learn in some form or fashion. And if they don't, they'll be able to pick it up from popular culture that's presented to them in a funny way. Now, whether they take that ball that's passed to them from that point on and then go to actually learn about some things, it's up to them. To your point that for something to be truly satirical, that it kind of has to be, making fun of something in a more direct manner as opposed to a roundabout manner. For me, one of the best examples of a satirical use of subject matter, and it's apples to oranges comparison here, is Konosuba's satirical take on isekai. And have you watched Konosuba?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Do you know what isekai is?
No.
Oh shit, fam! Less time to go to school.
Learn me something, Avery.
All right, so isekai, it's actually become its own subgenre now, but isekai is a Japanese term that literally means another world. And basically, in isekai fiction, a character is taken from one world to another. That's literally what it means, whisked away. And it became popularized after such cultural and cult classics such as like John Carter of Mars. So, and that's kind of where it became. But however, in more modern years, we've seen the isekai boom. That really and truly began with Sword Art Online. I would personally say that it started with Dot Hack, but most people don't remember Dot Hack.
What about Digimon? Would that classify?
Digimon does classify. Most people don't think about it though. And so, where the boom began, as I said, it was with Sword Art Online. And from there, you started to see all these quote unquote RPG lit examples. But it started to progress more and more to where each character needed to be like Kirito. They needed to be the best at this, the best at that, the best at this. To the point where OP main characters is now a standard of isekai. This person that's whisked away from their world to this next now has to be OP. He has to have some sort of special cheat. Just like Kirito had his speed, and he had his ability to dual wield, and he somehow had the world's greatest luck. And I guess the dude had mega pheromones because women were just throwing themselves at him.
That's how the one trope goes, isn't it?
Yeah. He either he was the only viable candidate or something was going on there. But, that's beside the point. And so all these characters pick up this OP main character thing and the harem aspect where every fertile available woman is throwing themselves at them. That became the standard for isekai. However, now Konosuba comes along. And Konosuba takes that entire situation and kicks it in the dick. And the reason Konosuba does this is it takes every bit of isekai tropes and switches it. Every bit of it. So normally in isekai, a character is either summoned to another world by some sort of spell gone wrong, or they die and are reborn. Kazuma, our main character, is reborn in this other world. And he is gonna get a cheat, just like everybody else. However, he gets screwed royally. So he goes to this other world and he decides, I want the ultimate cheat. He's being reincarnated by a god. So he gets to take one cheat with him to the next world. So what's he choose? The god. He chooses to take the god with him. Well, it turns out she's useless and stupid.
Damn.
And he gets this other world, which is now like a RPG. So people have classes and they have magic and stuff and they level up. Well, what's his class? Adventurer. What does that mean? You have the lowest stats ever. And you essentially are a jack of all trades, master of none, but they bury you completely. And, the god he brings with him gets to be a high priest. I mean, she has this amazing magic and she can do this, that, and the other. But again, she's stupid. So she spends all her magic points on trick magic. So she has no actual abilities to use magic in battle. She does parlor tricks. Mm-hmm. Well, he's having to learn all this stuff, and it's such a humorous take on all these. He's not overpowered. He's underpowered. The next teammate he gets uses amazing explosion magic. Problem with her is, explosion magic literally is one shot. And she refuses to learn any other magic other than explosion magic, because explosion magic is the coolest thing in the world to her. So she gets to launch one nuke at a time, and then she literally falls flat on her face and has to be carried for the rest of the day. Then he's thinking, well, okay, let's find another team member. Well, then he gets a team who is a crusader, which is essentially a paladin in their world. And then she's this girl who has massive strength, and she wields a sword and a shield, and she looks gallant. Problem is, she can't swing her sword. Not because she lacks the ability to, because she's a masochist and wants to be hurt.
Oh.
So she prefers to be a shield. And it's not, she's not a masochist just because she likes pain. No. She likes to be humiliated. She likes the idea of having her clothes ripped and being subjugated to inhuman tortures, including by Kazuma. Darkness is just... If you watch Konosuba, we're gonna have a discussion about darkness. She is legitimately one of the funniest characters in the show because there is something wrong with that poor child. And so, basically, usually in Isekai, the characters get together and they have these overpowered teams, and the main character is the most overpowered person. Here, every person is more amazing than our main characters, but they're completely useless because they're all idiots. Kazuma is the weakest person in the party, but he's literally the straight man in a world of morons. So he has to use his brain to get through things. And normally in anime, the smart character's fine. You look at things like Death Note, or you look at things like Log Horizon, where the character who's the smartest is the most powerful. Kazuma's probably the smartest character in the show. He also has the world's worst luck. And so everything bad that can happen to a character happens to Kazuma. Every single thing. Normally in isekais, the main character has horseshoes flying out of their ass because they are that fucking lucky. Oh, I tripped over this stick. Oh, what do you know? This stick is actually Excalibur. Or it'll be like, oh, I saved this old man from getting trampled by horses. Oh, well, let me reward you by offering you this mansion and my granddaughter. And so that shit happens. That doesn't happen to Kazuma. Kazuma spends the entire first season and a half completely destitute and then is put on trial for a crime he didn't commit. And then on top of that, he wins a whole bunch of money, gets a mansion, and thinks everything is turning out alright. And then Aqua is the god, because she's stupid, wastes all of his money, makes him destitute again to the point where they are literally burning his clothes for warmth. And one thing about Konosuba is it is legitimately funny. And I mean to the point where comedic manga don't make me laugh normally. Konosuba had me in tears. That's how funny it actually is. And because it takes all those things we've come to know about isekai and come to know about the overpowered shonen protagonist and come to know about the harem genre in fantasy and just says, fuck it. We're gonna make fun of everything. And I think for that, Konosuba is now used as the standard to show this is what the problem is with isekai. Because you have all of these things you come to expect. This is the problem. And this is why there's now a subgenre. And this is the problem with that subgenre. Because all these characters are the same. They're the same breakdown of a fucking character. Konosuba is looked at differently and is revered because it exposes all of those things, but does so in a humorous light to where you can point out, okay, obviously in a normal anime, okay, I get why that's stupid. Okay, I get why the one trope is dumb. Okay, I get why this character being supremely lucky is stupid and hampers the character. It does a very good job of exposing these things, but doing it in a palatable way. I think when parody and satire are brought up and are used by different mediums, it's able to allow people to, digest these things. Like what they say, how do you eat an elephant? A bite at a time. And so by using that little bit, it makes things a little bit easier to digest. I'm not saying that Hetalia was correct in what it did, because I don't exactly know how it functioned and what it did. But I think it was trying to coach the situation without beating you over the head with the information. However, unfortunately, sometimes satire and parody do go wrong, and it's just jokes for joke's sake, as you were saying.
Well, and I think Hetalia definitely hit the nail on the head several times. They make a joke, speaking of burning clothes, they make a joke about Greece burning its pants because it had nothing else to keep it warm. Because Greece went through a terrible, terrible economic downfall. And there's little things like that. I'm like, yeah, that is a well thought out joke. And if it's not well thought out, you definitely tripped and hit gold, because it works.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of stereotypes that are respectful in the show that are funny. Like, America is constantly eating hamburgers. And yeah, it sounds a lot like...
Sounds like a lot of American life.
And England is being depicted as not being able to make good food, and... France is very effeminate, and he flirts with a bunch of people. He's good at cooking, but he's not strong, and he's shown as always showing up after the fact to pile on when people have victories.
You know, it's weird because you mentioned that, and I was thinking about, I was like, I played this video game, Captain Tsubasa. For anyone who's a huge soccer fan, then they know the name Captain Tsubasa, especially if you grew up in any country outside of America. And the French team is the quote unquote the fourth strongest team in the game. It just depends on the route you end up going, but they're the opponent you face in the semifinals. And their entire thing, their main player and their strongest player, his entire motif is elegance and grace. It's not about power with him. It's about the ability to just do things through sheer technique and the beauty of it all. And I was just sitting there thinking, I was like, well, he's strong and he's powerful. I'm like, wait a minute, no, he's not. It was just like everything's about finesse with him. Wait a minute, it's total. So I was like, I guess the trope makes sense. I get it.
Yeah. And then I think there's more harmful stereotypes in the show that I won't necessarily get into, because that's not really the point of what I'm trying to say. My issue is when Hetalia misses the mark hard. Mm-hmm. It is attempting for parody or satire. And what do you know about movies that Hollywood produced that were against Germany in World War II? Before America actually went to war with Germany.
Well, considering America actually had like a non-aggression pact with Germany up until that point, I'm assuming it was very much a buddy cop movie. A
little bit. There's an excellent 2-part series on Behind the Bastards that goes into much more detail than I will. But essentially, America, in order to make money in Germany, which was one of their largest markets, had to play by their rules. So if Germany thought that a film was indecent, it was not allowed to be shown in Germany, which meant America would not make its money back. Much like now, Disney has to play by China's rules, because if it doesn't make its money in China, it doesn't make its money back. Things like King Kong. King Kong was not acceptable in Germany. Hitler thought it was hilarious, but it was not allowed to be shown in Germany. So I bring this up because there were literally less than a handful of movies. I'm talking like 2 films that were made trying to point out what was happening in Germany to the larger American audience. And both films were accidentally anti-Semitic. And Germany loved these films and uses clips from these films in their own propaganda, like The Eternal Jew. They cut it and then would dub over to explain why the Jew is greedy or the Jew is sneaky, using material from these films that were meant to be informative and well-intentioned.
Yeah.
And I guess that's my problem with Hetalia, is sure, maybe it is all well-intentioned. It's supposed to be funny. But when your fan base takes it and twists it, is it still parody? Hell, Charlie Chaplin dedicated so much time and effort into creating The Great Dictator. Mm-hmm. Hollywood, by the point where he was almost done with it, we had gone to war with Germany, was begging him to release it because we finally needed some anti-Hitler propaganda. Because back then, everybody fucking loved Hitler. Except for the people who didn't, and then they disappeared. But years later, Charlie Chaplin was on record regretting making The Great Dictator. He was afraid that while originally he believed that Hitler was deserving of ridicule and needed to be laughed at, post-war, Charlie Chaplin really wondered about the long-term good of what his film did. Because while, yeah, it defanged Hitler in its portrayal of this fictional Hitler, did it make him more dangerous? Because now he can slide under the radar into our consciousness, like Mel Brooks's films. Blazing Saddles.
Super racist.
Very racist. That was not Mel Brooks's intention, though.
Yeah.
So he thought he was making a parody, and... Yeah.
I've only seen bits and pieces of Blazing Saddles. I've maybe seen the first 30 minutes of Blazing Saddles.
Oh.
And it's, you know, and the sad part is, even in the first 30 minutes, you're like, oh, this is that kind of movie. But I mean, I guess you can even look at it in sort of a different kind of context. You know, like you said, Mel Brooks thought he was doing something different. You know, he thought he was just making, a comedy. He wasn't attempting to be racist in any way, shape, or form, because that's not who Mel Brooks was. But at the same time, you look at movies like that have come out more recently, such as Django Unchained. Mm-hmm. Not a comedy, but Quentin was not trying to be racist. But that movie is hella racist. But at the same time, it brought a lot of light to the atrocities of slavery at the time. Now, it was also in Quentin's own way, and we won't talk about the problems with Quentin Tarantino, who I absolutely love. There's inherent problems in his filmmaking, and unfortunately, some of those things continue to be used by new young filmmakers because they worship the ground Quentin walks on. But that stated, I completely get what you mean. It's unfortunate things are taken and twisted, and they're not what you intend for them to be when they're created.
Exactly. And I am not saying that the creator was in any way intentionally trying to be cruel. I think that in rewatching it, I got drunk yesterday and rewatched the first 2 seasons because maybe my memories of what the show was had been so twisted by my interactions with the fandom that I'd gotten it wrong. But no, it was what I remembered it to be. It's not on its face offensive, but it is insidious in how easy it is to twist.
Okay.
It doesn't hit the mark with enough of its jokes for it to qualify as a legit parody to me. I think it has its moments, like I said. And I don't even want to go so far as to say it's problematic, because I don't think it is. I really think it boils down to the fans being the issue. And that's unfortunate. And I desperately don't want a resurgence of that in the potential new season. But I think with where we are in fandom verse with the Puritans and their whole crusade, I can't imagine shit being much better. I still get death threats for disagreeing with people about censorship. I am very anti-censorship, for the record, in case anybody's wondering. I think that most things, if you have an intention to create it, you should be allowed to. Do I have to agree with what you create? No. Would I say that the creator of Hetalia shouldn't have created Hetalia? No. I think he had every right to. Do I like it? No. So, do I interact with it much? No. And that's fine. I wish more people did that. It's the instigation, the leveling up of fans to agitate each other, which is human nature, that really irritates me at the end of the day.
I can see that. Unfortunately, as I can say this now because I actually understand what it means, some fandoms do become toxic. Unfortunately, they take things about the product, about whatever that product may be, whether it be sports, whether it be anime, manga, comic books, film, radio dramas, whatever, and they take it wholeheartedly because it becomes a part of who they are. Mm-hmm. And they integrate that into every part of their everyday lives. And there's just nothing wrong with it. But where it becomes a problem is when the problematic areas, and I will say problematic areas of those products are then transferred onto their daily lives. Mm-hmm. So I'll bring this up. Juggalos. If you don't know what the Juggalos are fans of the Insane Clown Posse. You're either a Juggalo or a Juggalette. The Insane Clown Posse, funny enough, they sort of make Detroit hip hop, but their music it's very strange. It's usually very expletive laden. usually very strange. It's almost horrorcore in a way. Like it can get there.
If you've ever seen one of those people with their faces painted white with the black clown aspects of it, people out there listening in the ether, that's what a juggalo is.
Yeah, that's a juggalo. Here's the thing about the Insane Clown Posse. Their music is actually created, even though it's talking about like crazy things, the overwhelming message behind all of their songs and behind the Dark Carnival, which is the creed of the Juggalos, is about doing good, about going against the evils of the world. Matter of fact, I don't remember what year this was. It may have been 2006, 2007, I don't remember. They put out 2 albums, Heaven or Hell. And essentially, they tell you in those albums, in the little pamphlet that's in the album covers, they tell you, if you chose hell, you chose wrong. They're sort of telling you, like, if you thought this is what the Dark Carnival is about, you chose wrong. This is not the life you want to live. ICP is intentionally trying to lead people to God. That is their goal. That is their motive. They are very outspoken about their religious beliefs. They're very outspoken about that they want people to do good, that they want people to treat others well, that they want to get rid of the evils in the world. And therefore, a lot of their creeds are based upon biblical principle. That's well and good. That's their intention. Now, the reason we bring up Juggalos...
Here it comes. Everyone brace yourself.
Juggalos have been involved in a lot, and I do mean a lot, of crime issues. They are at some points classified as an organized gang. They're involved in lots of murders. And these are people taking the message of ICP and warping it. Like, making it such a part of their daily lives that they are going to the absolute breaking point. That's not what ICP created, the dark circus or the Juggalos for. They wanted to create a place where they could help to push a message out about being good and have a place of acceptance for Juggalos and Juggalettes. And some people take that and go completely left. Just, it gets bad. And so that's an extreme example. Like, when I say it goes extreme with the Juggalos, I literally mean they've been involved in some pretty heinous things. And those are the outskirts members. Now, going back to Hetalia, are all members of the Hetalia fandom like that? I would assume no.
No.
But there are definitely some people who, are stands of Germany, and they're like, I want to be just like Germany, and being just like Germany means I have to make fun of Jewish people, and I have to do horrible things, and that's not the point. That's not what the creator was doing. I mean, I don't know how Germany is in the show. I don't know if Germany is a fascist dickhead.
Honestly, no. Germany's pretty nice, which is, I think, why I find it very unfortunate, because he's a fairly nice, likable character, all things considered. He's very rigid, German stereotype. And honestly, it was like you said earlier, Germany does a lot to educate so that we don't repeat our mistakes. So the fact that people twist it and decide to harp on and bite down on that one aspect of German history is pretty sad.
It's upsetting, and I would assume that there's no creator who wants that to be the message people take out of their shows. For anyone who's listening who's not a writer, by and large, most writers create stuff with a message behind it. That does not mean all things have a message behind it. For you English majors out there, you know who you are. Just because someone has purple curtains in a scene does not mean that they're representing their misplaced childhood.
The curtains are just purple!
I'm sorry. I've taken a lot of English classes. Those people exist. We've had conversations. But a lot of times a creator has a message behind what they're attempting to convey. And usually it's a positive message, or it's usually referring to a subject, or they're going a roundabout manner of providing some sort of catharsis for people. I know in the anime Blue Seed, the creator was basically going about through this whole idea of the origami and, basically retelling the story of, Kagasuchi and Kushinari Hime. But it was also talking about, it was a celebration of humanity. It was a celebration of people and the love and the strength that can come from us coming together against a common force. Therefore, how did they defeat the origami? They literally partied. They had Matsuri. They literally partied to give strength to to give strength to Kusanagi. And that's how the world worked there. It was a celebration of humanity. And I'm pretty sure here Hetalia is supposed to be a celebration of cultural differences, and also how they're same, celebrating their friendships. And some people just take the worst aspects of that and just like, nah, fuck all that bullshit.
Well, and as a creator, I do genuinely feel empathy for Himariya, because I don't think that he intended for his work to be twisted like that. And it's sad. Do I lay some of the onus at his feet? Maybe. Maybe just a little bit.
Just tiny bit.
Just a tiny bit. Take some creative writing workshops on how to write parody. Not that I get to be the end-all, be-all, of have the last say on that, but I just don't think your content actually hits the mark enough for it to be considered good parody. But at the end of the day, I really do think it's the fan base that ruins it with a lot of things. So it's unfortunate.
You know, and this is just me throwing things out there. And, you know, if you have any Japanese fans who would want to explain this to you, by all means. Maybe there's a culture difference in what is considered parody and satire in Japan as opposed to what it is here in the States.
By all means, if y'all know, if I have any Japanese fans out there who know why anime has so many Nazis in it, or why maybe I don't feel like there's enough parody in it, maybe I am missing something, please hit me up. I am always down to have conversations with people. Do not hit me up with death threats.
I was about to say,
I'm having a year, y'all.
all of this entire world is having a year. Like, whoo! Stay off Facebook, folks. Stay off Facebook.
Yeah, but anyway, Avery, do you think we talked about the thing?
We talked the hell out about that thing.
Well then, everybody, I want to thank y'all for joining us today on this rambling journey. I am Bliss, and you can find me at Blissfully Show on Twitter and Instagram. Tell me if you think I'm wrong. Come hit me up. Let's have a conversation. And Avery, where can the good people at home find you?
Well, I don't do social media. But if you guys do, you guys just want to hear me and my friends ramble, and also Miss Bliss here, you can check out my podcast, which is the Brews and Reviews podcast at Idiot's Guide to Cinema, where we sit down every 2 weeks and just talk about movies. We break them down, we make jokes, we get drunk, and it's always generally a good time. So yeah, if you like films, come on over, bring your favorite brew. We've already had 2.
It genuinely is one of my favorite podcasts, and I'm not saying that just because I happen to have been on it. But can people find you on any of the social medias, though, Brews and Reviews?
If you want to follow us on the social medias, the platforms, you can find us at the Brewcast Crew on Twitter, and the Brews and Reviews Pod on Instagram.
But until next time, thank you so much for joining me, Avery.
No problems. Thank you for having me.
And I will see y'all later. Bye!
Bye!
Yay, we did it! We did it! We did it! Talk about a show that got racial parody right, though. Gotta love me some Dora the Explorer.